Welcome to the Agent Workforce podcast. This is episode 16 and we are in season 2. My name is Kristiina. I'm head of marketing at Digital Workforce, and with me is my amazing co-host Niko Lehtonen, AI solution architect at Digital Workforce. Good to see you again, Niko.
Likewise. A lot has happened again, somehow.
Yes. In today's episode, we'll talk about prompting in the age of GPT-5. Then we'll cover a new report by MIT Nanda. And then lastly, we'll hear some greetings from UiPath Agentic AI Hackathon. With that, let's kick off. GPT-5 prompting is a little bit different from prompting before, and OpenAI has announced their GPT-5 prompting guide, and you can find this on cookbook.openai.com/example/GPT-5 GPT prompting guide, and you can search this on Google or we'll give the exact URL in the show notes. It's a long file that goes in depth through the different elements of building a great prompt with ChatGPT's new GPT-5. And we were discussing the anatomy of an O1 prompt with you, Niko, here in this podcast. And I just looked back, and that was in February. And O1, the full version of O1, the first reasoning model of OpenAI was released in full mode in December 2024, and O1 Mini and O1 Preview had become available in September 2024. And we covered this, like the anatomy of a good prompt, then O1 in, like said, it was in February 2025. And I'm sharing my screen, but for those who are not or listening our show on the audio platforms, the anatomy of an O1 prompt was about a goal, a return format, warnings, and finally a context dumped. So when we talk about GPT-5 and the good prompt in GPT-5, people have put together this source for a great prompt for GPT-5. And with that, you'll define a role, then you'll define a task, define context, reasoning, output, and conditions. And I'm sharing again my screen, and this is from a LinkedIn group, Generative AI, where you can see the sample prompt there. But yeah, it like I said, it includes more steps than the recommended O1 prompt back then. And the thing is sort of from O1 was built around what to fetch, how to return it. So goal, return format, warnings, context. And now we have moved with GPT-5 into building around how to act and what to deliver. So from role to task to context to reasoning, output, and conditions. So this is sort of a shift from tell me the info in this format, which was O1, into a play this role, think this way, give me a polished final product, which is GPT-5. Niko, I know particularly in this guide that OpenAI has put together in their cookbook, OpenAI, this has a lot to do with also when building agentic AI solutions and the API connections. So anything you can tell us from this perspective?
Yeah, sure. So as soon as I got my hands on this, I went through it and I went through it with the technical team and there were quite a few things that actually were quite interesting that are gonna help us as well when building agents and so on. And I guess the first thing that's mentioned even at the beginning of the prompting guide is actually the prompt optimizer tool that OpenAI also has. I've not used it yet, I'll admit it, but it's also available on the OpenAI platform. So definitely have to give that a go going forward. But pretty much the biggest thing that jumped to my eyes here was the new responses API, where the reasoning is persisting between the tool calls. And that then, of course, means that it's going to be, the output is going to be more reliant. It's not going to forget the original task if you do multiple calls back and forth. And this is really huge for agentic systems that are using human in the loop or agent to agent features. And they also say it's reducing the amount of chain of thought tokens per action. And that, of course, means there's lower latency and faster performance. So less repetitiveness required and less need to try and cram all the previous steps into the context window every time you rerun the tool call and so on. So that's really important. There's also a lot of new prompting instructions in the cookbook itself. There's some new parameters as well, like reasoning effort. How much work should the LLM put into its response? So by fiddling with this, you can make it answer quickly or take its time, and so on. So you just have more power. You can affect its performance more for those cases where it's necessary. And from a sort of collaborative coding perspective, they're also recommending certain frameworks and packages for front-end development, like React. And they're even recommending certain fonts. And why that is, I'm not so sure. I definitely need to try this with my hobby projects in Cursor and specify to use these particular packages that are mentioned here and just see how the performance differs. Is it more reliable? Is it less hallucinative? So on, so on. And I guess all in all, in general, I could say that it's very clear that they put a lot of emphasis onto how to code with this model. And there's a section there that's actually done in collaboration with Cursor that's about optimizing the GPT-5 performance in Cursor and what kind of changes Cursor made to their prompts when using GPT-5 that's going to optimize the behavior even further, because this model acts differently than the others, as is always the case. And so, yeah, I think for anyone technically interested in how to get the best out of GPT-5, I can highly recommend this prompting guide if you've not checked it out yet.
Thanks, Niko. That was great. And it's, like I said, we'll put the link into the show notes. All right, let's move on to the second big topic. And that's a study by MIT Nanda, which is called the GenAI Divide, State of AI in Business 2025. And we thought that we're going to introduce this study by playing a video for you guys. And the way we produced the video is that we have mentioned Google Notebook LM tool previously, which is a fantastic tool if you do any research, if you want to put together files from now I'm using just this one file, but you can use multiple different sources. You can do audio overviews, podcasts, sort of. You can get mind maps created. And now this is a recent new feature into the Notebook LM, something called video overview. And for those who can see my screen, I'm showing my Notebook LM where I have added the PDF file, this study, and there is a video overview, which I'm going to play for you guys just now. So I'm going to turn that on. And yeah, with that, let's listen to that video first and then comment on it.
All right, welcome to The Explainer. Today we're diving into a huge mystery, something that's baffling the entire business world. I'm talking about the generative AI paradox. You see, companies are throwing billions of dollars at this tech, but the results, well, they're not what you'd expect. So let's get our detective hats on and crack this case.
Okay, so the investigation starts with one number, and honestly, it's a jaw dropper. We're talking 30, maybe $40 billion poured into enterprise Gen AI. And for all that money, a staggering 95% of companies are getting absolutely zero measurable return. Let that sink in. 95%. That's not just a rounding error, that is a massive chasm.
And you know what? This giant gap, it actually has a name. And this is the core idea we're going to unpack today. It's called the GenAI Divide. It's this massive split. On one side, you have a tiny handful of companies absolutely crushing it, and on the other, pretty much everyone else, just kind of stuck, scratching their heads and wondering, hey, where's that revolution we were promised? So let's be super clear about what this means. The Gen AI divide isn't about who's trying AI, it's about who's getting real impact. You've got that top 5% pulling in millions in actual value. And then there's the other 95%, you know the ones. They've got plenty of cool pilot projects, some really slick demos, but when you look at the bottom line, crickets, nothing. So you might be asking, how do we know this is really happening? Well, the evidence is pretty undeniable. This is the real puzzle, right? How can everyone be adopting this stuff, but almost nobody is actually transforming their business with it? Let's dig into the evidence, look at the clues, and see what the data tells us is really going on. First piece of evidence, the reality of disruption. You hear all this hype, right? But when you look at the data, only 2 out of 9 major industries, tech and media, no surprise there, are seeing any real deep structural change from AI. For everyone else, finance, healthcare, you name it, it's pretty much business as usual. And this isn't just numbers on a chart. Listen to this. It's from a COO in manufacturing, and it just hits the nail on the head. The hype on LinkedIn says everything has changed, but in our operations, nothing fundamental has shifted. That right there, that's the feeling on the ground. It's that massive gap between the social media hype and what's actually happening day to day.
Okay, now this is where the story gets really, really clear. We call this the pilot to production chasm. So yeah, general tools like ChatGPT, they get used. But the custom enterprise level AI systems, the ones that are supposed to drive real business value, they have a 95% failure rate. Only 5% of them ever actually make it out of the pilot phase and into production. That's a brutal drop-off.
But check this out. Here's a wild twist in the story. While all these big official company projects are crashing and burning, something else is happening. A shadow AI economy is absolutely exploding. Get this, only about 40% of companies have an official subscription to a large language model. But a whopping 90% of employees are using their own personal AI tools to get their work done. The people are figuring it out, even when their companies can't. All right, let's recap the evidence. We've got low disruption across most industries, we've got a graveyard of failed pilot projects, and we've got this booming shadow economy of employees using their own tools. So, what is the real reason for all of this? What's the core problem? This is the breakthrough moment.
It's easy to point fingers at the usual suspects. Oh, the model quality isn't there yet. Or it's all about data privacy. Or the legal risks are just too high. And look, those things are part of the conversation, for sure. But they are not the main reason. The real barrier is something way more fundamental.
Listen to this corporate lawyer. This is so revealing. The $50,000 enterprise AI tool her company bought, she said it was rigid, it just gave her these canned summaries. But her $20 a month personal ChatGPT account, with that she could guide the conversation, she could iterate, she could tweak things until she got exactly what she needed. The cheap consumer tool just worked better for her.
And that brings up a really important question, right? If these consumer tools are so great and employees are already using them on the sly, why aren't they using them for the really critical high-stakes stuff? What's stopping them?
And that same lawyer gives us the answer. It's not about intelligence. The AI is plenty smart. The problem is memory. These consumer tools are fantastic for a quick one-off task, but they don't learn from your feedback. They don't remember what your client likes. They don't recall the edits you made last time. They are, and I love this phrase, brilliant amnesiacs.
And that brings us right to the heart of the mystery, the main culprit. We're calling it the learning gap. This is the fundamental reason why 95% of these systems fail. They just can't retain feedback, they can't adapt to new info, and they never ever get better on their own. You, the human, have to start from square one every single time.
And this learning gap, it has huge consequences. Look at this data. For simple, everyday tasks, sure, people are fine using AI. But for the complex, really important, high-stakes work, people trust another human 9-to-1 over an AI. It's not about how smart the AI is. The real dividing line is its ability to learn and remember. Okay, so mystery solved. We found the culprit. It's the learning gap. But now for the part you've been waiting for. What are the winners? That top 5% doing differently? What's their playbook? How do you actually cross the GenAI divide?
Well, the playbook starts with a totally different mindset. The successful buyers, they aren't chasing the flashiest new features or the biggest, baddest model. Look at what they prioritize. A vendor they trust, a tool that can actually improve over time, and a partner who deeply understands their specific workflow. They're not just buying a product, they're looking for a partner who can help them solve that learning gap. Next up in the playbook is a big strategic choice, buy versus build. And the data here could not be clearer. Trying to build these complex learning systems from scratch in-house, it fails twice as often as partnering with an expert vendor. The winners aren't trying to reinvent the wheel. They buy, they partner, and they customize. It's just flat out twice as likely to succeed. So where's the actual money? Where is the real ROI? Well, it's funny. Sales and marketing, the front office stuff, it gets all the hype and budget. But the biggest wins, the multi-million-dollar savings, they're hiding in plain sight in the back office. Automating things like finance, procurement, that's where companies are saving $2, $5, even $10 million a year, often by getting rid of expensive, outsourced contracts. Okay, so we've got the playbook. We know how to cross the divide. But what's waiting for us on the other side? Let's take a quick look into the future, because this tech is moving at lightning speed. And the future has a name. Agentic. And no, this is not science fiction stuff. This is the very next evolution. It's called the Agentic Web.
We're talking about a network of AI systems that don't just wait for you to type a prompt. They can learn, they can remember, and they can coordinate with each other to get complex jobs done, all without a human babysitting them. Think of them less like a tool and more like a team of autonomous digital coworkers.
And this brings me to a final and pretty urgent point. The window of opportunity here, it's closing, and it's closing fast. Most experts project that companies will lock in their core AI vendors within the next year and a half. And once a system is deeply integrated, trained on all your company's unique data and workflows, the cost to switch to something else becomes massive. You're essentially locked in.
So look, the GenAI divide is real, but it's not a permanent state of being. The playbook for how to cross it is right there. It's clear, which means the question every leader needs to be asking themselves isn't if my competitors are going to cross this divide, it's when. And, maybe more importantly, what's going to happen to the companies that get left behind.
Yeah. So before we dive into the actual content of that video, I have to say that it's quite impressive what you can do with Notebook LM just by inserting data and it's creating on the go this type of a video with illustrations and some highlights. It does work without the video, but if you have a chance to look at the video as well, and it will, for those learners who learn by seeing as well, it might be a good way to like highlight some of the key findings in this. But yeah, what are your first thoughts, Niko?
Yeah, I mean, when I first saw an article referencing this paper, it was quite hyperbolic, focusing on the fact that 95% of AI projects fail to see any value. But as you can see from this video, the further you go, the further along you go, the actual research, it becomes clear to see what the reasoning behind that is and how to sort of avoid that. And a lot of it is probably also a cultural thing. So I'm presuming the numbers will be very different, for instance, here in Finland than they are in the States, where the level of adapting to things is just the thresholds are different. But one thing that is really clear to see in that is that you have double the chances of succeeding if you do it with a partner rather than try to build it yourself. And that success rate becomes even higher if it's a sort of collaborative effort indeed, rather than a one-off type of thing.
Yes. And this data was collected this year, so it's from January to June 2025. And the method was so-called multi-method. So they were using 300 publicly disclosed AI initiatives analyzed, 52 structured interviews, organization representatives, 153 senior leaders surveyed at 4 industry conferences. So we don't know exactly the division of different industries represented, nor the exact titles. And so there are a lot of open things, but I feel that we can still see that this is useful and like directionally interesting, but of course not definitive. And also these are preliminary findings, not peer reviewed yet. But like you said, Niko, some very interesting points. What stood out to me was the learning issue and the memory issue, which is particularly big when in terms of like enterprise AI agent use case. Therefore, you need to define the scope really, really well and build a solution for that alone and work with a partner who's specialized in the workflows and can support you in that. Also, what stood out to me was that it was 7 out of 9 industries that had not seen that huge results yet, but 2 out of 9 had seen. So those were technology and media industry. So we are definitely seeing this gap that some are quite advanced and do see like massive results, whereas others are not quite yet there. And this report might give you some insights how to narrow the gap and reach to those like 4 runners. But yeah, some really interesting data points in this study for sure.
Yeah, and one thing that's also mentioned there is that indeed just buying a solution or buying technology hasn't provided that value. So maybe the adoption rate has been low, or maybe it's not been well defined where to use the tool. It's just been thought that we are now going to purchase this AI tool, it's going to bring great benefits. Whereas you should start from the process first type of thinking and try to find the process that you want to improve, and then see how you can improve it and so on, which is what we actually tend to do in our discovery workshops. So the tool itself isn't going to solve everything and anything or everything. You really need to have a different process-minded approach for that.
Yeah, that's very true. And finally, they talked about this agent to agent, the agentic web, and the emergence of agentic web. And that is something where I strongly believe in, and we're going to see a lot of that coming up in probably this year, next year, even more, when agent will reach out to agent in terms of different like services and requests and all that. So that is definitely something they're highlighting in this study as well. But yeah, that's all for the MIT Nanda study. And then finally, our last topic is about UiPath Hackathon, and you have some news for us from that.
Yeah. So it's not one where we participated, but some of the processes and the ideas here were, I think, worth mentioning. So I thought I'm just going to handpick a few. Some of these are similar use case than what we've seen around the world with our customers and so on. So it's nice to see that they are getting recognized in the hackathon as well. There's a social care note analyzer, which is estimated to save up to 100,000 work hours per year in a typical EU country. How do you define a typical EU country? I'm the wrong person to answer that, but these are the numbers that the project team had come up with. They are estimating that you could save up to 45 or even 50 FTEs per year with this solution. And the more cases you have per year, the more savings, obviously. So if you have 10,000 cases per year, you're going to save about 4 to 5 FTEs. If you have 100,000 cases per year, then you can tenfold the FTE savings as well. These are all available on UiPath's website. We can provide a link to that as well. And all the project files are actually there as well. So if you have something to do with UiPath and your team are building solutions and so on, you can check out how these have been done using the Maestro and the AI agents and a lot of the other features that are in the UiPath toolkit. The other one was then a procurement agent system. And again, there's a lot of things that are being mentioned here, but it comprises of 6 agents. One is an orchestrator agent, and then that orchestrates 5 other agents. And it was actually quite interestingly done. Unfortunately, all of these were just POCs and they weren't connected to actual systems and so on. But I think from an example perspective, if you want to see something, how you would start to implement your own, for instance, these are quite good ways to get started. So for instance, this procurement agent has a quote validator agent as the first part that's going to audit every quote, after which there's a supplier recommendation agent that's going to check which suppliers would be best for your purchase needs. Then there's a quote recommendation agent that is going to then evaluate the supplier quotes to identify which is the best option for you. And finally, there's the processor agent that automates the purchase order creation. And then there's the follow-up agent that sends the purchase order acknowledgement emails, tracks the responses, and sends reminders to the suppliers to make sure that everything is they're keeping track on the time and there's no delays and so on. So yeah, and this is usually how these things are built. So instead of trying to build one agent that tries to look through all of this, you build a system that has these smaller tasks split to one agent at a time. And then the orchestration layer and the orchestration agent make sure that all these things are run like they should be. But yeah, that was a really good example there. Happy to see that on the hackathon. And the last one I'm going to note here is the medical code interpreter agent. So a common challenge that takes time and usually is a bit manual is mapping the ICD codes to procedure codes within healthcare. And then collecting this information, trying to come up with an estimate on the pricing of the whole operation, however many procedures are needed there. So this solution just takes that work, creates a bill out of it for the insurance company, and then it's just checked that it is in agreement with the payer and the patient. I can say that based on my experiences, this is one thing that's also a problem on the global market quite heavily. But yeah, do check them out. As mentioned, we'll have a link in the notes You can take a look yourself. There's a presentation for each project. There's the project files for each project. And yeah, it's a good watch.
Thank you. Thank you for the concrete examples, what you can build with AI agents and agentic AI structures, and particularly using orchestration. Reminds me of the our own agent workforce setup and how that has been built. Multi-agent structure and orchestration agents. That's great. I also wanted to remind you guys, if you haven't done so yet, we have AgentAcademy.ai, where we have a free course called Understanding Agentic AI, and where we're just looking into statistics with Niko here a few days ago. And I think it was over 3,200 people or something like that who had signed up for the course, which is amazing. Thank you so much. And a big part of that group had received a certificate as well. So they had completed the course, and that certificate will become available for you to put on LinkedIn. And I know we're looking into the course and updating some of the content as well, because the world has moved on so fast. But I also wanted to tell you guys that the reviews that we have received from that course are excellent. Niko, do you want to pick that up from somewhere? I know you were looking into that data, but it was very, very good. So I think 4.6 out of 5 or something like that. So if you haven't done so yet, go and check out that course yourself on
Yeah,
Agent
exactly.
Academy.
And as mentioned, it is picking up pace in terms of registrations and in terms of courses being completed and so on. So it's doubled in the past 3 months.
Yes. Wow. That's amazing. Well, that's all for today's episode. Thank you so much. Thanks again, Niko. And we look forward to speaking with you guys soon again.
Thank you again.
Thanks.